Hey guys, welcome again today for another episode. Even though it's been a double today, it's a honor for me to be able to have two in a day. So this morning we had BW from A Coffee Melbourne, and today in a matter of minutes we'll be joined by Mark Dundon. So very excited about it. To give a Tanti, Hanife, Coffee Perv. CK Coffee, Manuel, Bianca, big shout out. Bianca, what's up? Hi Vince, barista, good to see you. Hope you're super well. I'm glad you're here, Bianca, you made it today. Hope you're super well, hope you're relaxed, hope you're safe, same with your family. Hope you got coffee with you. Hanife, good to see you. And I'm very excited for this guest. Never met him, but heard a lot about him. And hey, Ben, thank you for joining us. Nazila, AJ Coffee, Glenn, good to see you all. So yeah, very excited. I never met the man, Mark Dundon, so we'll absolutely have a pleasure to talk to him. We might send him, hey Anthony from Brew Theory, what's up? Kazamani, Glenn, va.sbni. I'm going to send him an invite just because I don't know how often he's done these type of live streams. Let me have a look. Here we go. I'll send him an invite now. So yeah, if you're tuning in, hey Olaf, Miss Yami. Basically, this morning we had BW from A Coffee. That was an amazing interview as usual. Hey Melimora, Norbert. It's going to be exciting because it's with Mirko. You're too nice, Bianca. We should get you on here. We already spoke about it. Burke and yeah, Mark is in the house, so we'll send him the request now. And hey man, hey mate.
Hey, how are you?
Fantastic. I'm super honored and humbled to having finally the chance to meet you, even though it's virtually, but it's much better than not. So thank you so much to share your time with us. And I hope that you and your family are safe and sound as far as, health goes and all of that.
Yeah, we're all good. Yeah, thanks for asking.
Yeah, no, it's been crazy times across the world, and we all have relatives around the world and different
Yeah,
continents, friends. So I think that as long as none of them impacted our loved ones, then we're winning for sure.
hopefully. Yeah, I think we should all try and stay safe and yeah, get through it. We're all in it together, so it's hard, I think, for a lot of people. It's difficult times.
Yeah, my parents were stuck in quarantine for 74 days in the north part of Italy. So I can
Wow.
definitely, yeah, but like I said, everybody's good. So we just got to be grateful.
True, very true.
Well, look, thanks again for coming in. Hey, Nolan, good to see you, brother. We'll just get started. Basically, you consider one of the pioneers of specialty coffee in Melbourne, and we have so much gratitude for what you did. But not many people know. How did you actually start your coffee journey?
Yeah, like I started a small cafe in Brunswick about 20 years ago when there wasn't a lot of cafes in Brunswick. And I think, not a lot of small, I suppose, cafes that really focused on looking at coffee. Like back then, it was very much about, a couple of brands in Melbourne that were very Italian based, which is all fine. But for me, I really wanted to explore the product in coffee and understand, the roasting, where it came from, what coffees were in certain blends and things like that. So I started a small coffee shop. It only, it's just about 20 seats. Yeah, very small, and just enjoyed it. Opened the doors, and it attracted a lot of local people in, and we were doing some local food with a lot of the Turkish and Lebanese suppliers up there. So it was just nice. It was nice just to tap into the local community.
And if you want to know a funny story, My first ever, I started drinking coffee very late, despite being in Oslo for 9 or 10 years.
Yeah.
But my first ever sip of coffee was actually a raise.
Oh, yeah.
It
Yeah.
was my partner's. She was having a latte or whatever, partner at the time, and yeah, I had a sip. I was like, come on, I must like coffee, and so it's funny. It's such a beautiful
Yeah.
venue still, and yeah, and obviously Turkish and Lebanese food there ticked
Yeah.
many boxes. I'm assuming in Brunswick,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
and yeah, like you said, was one of the first in Brunswick. Now there's no shortage of cafes in the area.
There's no shortage of cafes, no. So
No.
yeah, so that was the first little cafe, and I enjoyed it. It was great, the social aspect and really nice working with the product that goes through so many hands and trying to meet the people who it has passed through. So yeah, it was great fun.
Yeah,
Um,
I can imagine. Yeah.
like I sold Ray like to like yeah like a few years after I set it up, and it's still going today. And then moved to South Melbourne and set up St. Ali, and that's where I really started getting into roasting and looking at that sort of aspect of the business. And had that going for a while, and then moved on to Seven Seeds, which is where I'm still at now. So yeah.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey, and I suppose how crucial was your explorative trips that you made overseas, as far as looking even at the USA coffee market, for example, because really 20 years ago, Melbourne, like you said, there was very little coffee brands, like you name a few Italian ones. Again, nothing wrong with it,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that Senali Seven Seeds kind of really started a big ramp. Was it a strong influence on looking at other markets?
Well, I think yeah, like I went to the US to actually really do some roasting courses and do some cupping, learn how to really taste coffee and look at what faults there were in coffee or things like that. So I just wanted to explore. There wasn't really anything happening in Australia in regards to training, so I went and did a few courses in the US, which was great. It really introduced me to the process of analyzing your own coffee and doing all that. So, and then I sort of hooked up with Cup of Excellence and started doing some jury work with them. So I traveled to Origin and, you know, Colombia and Africa and, a lot of Central American, countries where we source coffee. So it was great to really get involved and really look at, what type of varietals are coming from where. Like it was an exciting time in coffee um, with a lot of, I suppose changes in regards to, different varietals going from one particular country to another. Like the geisha thing happened, and all that sort of stuff. So it was really interesting times. It was great. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah, and what I really like about your stories, and I'm sure there's plenty that I don't know of, but it's like in terms of having a vision, we look up at people like, Steve Jobs or Elon Musk and, these big people, and they see things that certain people can't see. And, I think as Centrale or Seven Seeds and the whole warehouse turned into an amazing cafe, but not only that, despite the grunginess, it's also a very higher quality level of coffee, because that's kind of the benchmark that you were setting up those days and still today. Could you describe a little bit, briefly the idea behind each project that you started?
Sure. Well, look, I think like I have a few projects like in regards to like I do have another side project, Paramount Coffee Project, which is in Sydney and in the USA. Um, but I think really fundamentally looking at what I want to do, Seven Seas personifies that a little bit. Like we really wanted to look at coffee and explore, but I think have a sustainable base. Going to Origin and seeing, that it's very difficult to farm and produce coffee. It's very, yeah, and it's not because of the tyranny of distance. Farmers aren't really rewarded that well, and especially over recent years where you've seen, extremely low prices for coffee, it being undervalued, whereas, you know, um, the industry has gone through a boom. You can say specialty coffee has really, risen, and there's a lot more, a lot of money in it in Australia and the US. But the reality with the producers, I don't think I've really seen so much advancement at origin, at the producing countries, which disappoints me. So
Which,
for us, sorry, go on.
well, I was smiling because it was leading to my next question, which is you big advocate about coffee pricing, which that's super important. And do you think that coffee should be treated and priced more like wine, given the similarities? I used to trade wine back in the day. That's why I'm
Yeah,
asking.
yeah. Well, I think when you look at the journey of coffee and the hands that it goes through, like if I go down to, the local bar and pay $12 for a specialty beer that's water, hops, perhaps grown here, perhaps New Zealand, or perhaps overseas, but the whole components of that and the actual cost of that drink is so small compared to what coffee is. And at the risk of sounding a little sort of presumptuous, like when you go to one of the coffee shows and you see all the machines and you see all the money that goes into coffee, I get disappointed when there's not so much respect towards the actual ingredient, coffee. Um, so to me, I think we need to band together as a group a little more and actually upsell the product. There's no one really there trying to, talk about the product as a whole and really repping it to a point where it should be, have an industry that really stands up for coffee as it is and educate people in regards to it. I see a lot more of that happening elsewhere in other sort of industries.
Other countries too. In fact, I mean, what would take Australia, reckon, to start paying a little bit more, compared to other countries? 'Cause like you said, I mean,
Yeah,
there's countries like the USA or even Italy. In a funny way, I
yeah.
went to a couple of specialty coffee shops there, and in comparison to the standard market, they charge higher prices than even here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think Australia's probably the cheapest place to buy coffee almost. Like in the US, we would charge $5 US for a latte, so that's like $7.50, Australian dollars. So here, I think it's very cheap, and I think it's going to be difficult in this current environment to raise prices. But I think roasters and retailers need to really stand up for the product and start a dialogue where it talks about um, what it costs to produce. Like I think it's only a matter of time until there is talk of like illegal coffee or coffee that's grown and paying people under minimum wage and things like that, because pretty much a lot of that is what coffee is based on to a certain extent. Like specialty coffee should be transparent. You should be able to really look at, if someone says I'm a specialty coffee roaster and this is a specialty coffee, I would assume that you could see where that coffee is from. You would get an understanding of, the pedigree of that coffee, and yeah, be able to trace it back and see that the producer is getting, like I think with the current climate here in Australia, a lot of people are saying that they are using great coffee, but not really willing to share the proof of the pedigree of that coffee. And I think it's important. It's very, like specialty means nothing. So, I think it's important to actually mean what you say. We don't use the word specialty anymore because of the fact that it is easily usurped by other roasters who don't have the same intention.
And well, I'm a positive person by default, but something that I'm aware of with this COVID-19 situation is also that having worked for a coffee roaster, especially on the ground, there's such a high amount of competition, just as much as between cafes. There's 12 shops between 400 meters in some streets. And what happens usually is, the classic sharp deals in terms of getting business. Like, I would love one day to have a dream of, there's a regulation and, there's a standard minimum or maximum price that can be charged kilo. Some countries have regulations like that, which I think they're quite clever in a way.
Yeah, well, I think like it doesn't worry me if you don't want to claim that your coffee, if you want to say that your coffee is special, you're like, I don't mind if you want to say you know, you're roasting like, yeah, you're roasting like a commodity coffee. You want to call, and you don't want to call yourself specialty. You might want to call yourself whatever, and you don't, make assumptions that you're doing great work for for the producer. Um, but if you do say that, I think you need to prove it. I think you can, you should be questioned. To me, there's too many people saying, "Oh, look, we're doing great work. We're paying, above fair trade organic price or fair trade price." But the reality with fair trade, with the C market, is it's not enough to cover the basic cost of production of coffee. Um, like to me, I don't want to, jam up the conversation, but I just think it's an important point that as
No,
we
no,
move
it's
further
important.
forward, yeah, as we move further forward, you need to make it, a profession that people want to do, And I think at the moment there are people ripping out plants, thinking that, they can't really see a future. I think a lot of coffee people here in Australia just don't even think of that aspect that, when you look at someone who's producing coffee, they'll have a couple of different crops in the ground. And to ensure that, that continues, it needs to meet cost of production. That's the basic. It should be a lot more. Um, and so the thing I think is that you need to really protect the future of coffee by paying enough money for people to continue to farm it. And if you don't, in 10 years, we'll be in real trouble.
Yeah.
Coffee prices will spike. They're actually starting to go up now. And then we'll be playing catch up with the public, trying to explain to them what the problem is. But we don't want that.
100%. And I think Luca Coffee Notes summed that up quite well by saying if you're selling commodity grade and calling your business specialty, you're objectively misleading and deceiving the consumer. I think that's also another important point. And what's your thoughts in terms also of, without making names, but there's a couple of roasters that on their single origin tasting notes cards, they also include how much they pay their price at origin or at
Yeah.
market, and what it costs to them at the end. Do you think
Yeah.
it's something?
Yeah, look, I think people shouldn't be scared about saying that they're making money. Like if you're an importer or whatever, you need to really understand, people need to understand that everyone makes money. There's a lot of risk in importing green coffee and things like that. But I think to really get back to the farm gate where you understand that the producer is paid, above $1.80 a pound, USD a pound. Colombia has asked, the FNC, which is the governing body in Colombia, the government body has asked to limit it at $2 a pound. And when you see countries like that putting a limit on it, I think you can get a fair idea of what's good for the industry and what's bad for the industry. And so if you actually are buying coffee for $1.50 a pound, which a lot of people are, you can understand that there's problems in the future of coffee if that's what's coming into most of the blends in Australia. And it's hard. It's really difficult if you're paying, $2.50 to $3 to $3.50 a pound for coffee to compete with people who say they're specialty and offering their blends for $22, a kilo here in Australia. But the reality is, a lot of people who are going into, cafes and those industries now aren't as educated as what we were back in the day. And so a specialty coffee from one person at 22 and a specialty coffee from someone else at 34, it's essentially the same thing to them. So I think we need to educate the market. We need to, I think as specialty coffee, whether it's, the organisation in Australia or even the US, there needs to be, I think, some understanding of a price back to the producer for that claim or whatever it is. So yeah, I think that would be great from my point of view to see that. But I think, it'll be interesting to see what happens here. I think coffee prices will go up, and I think it's very difficult for cafe owners at the moment to survive in this current crisis. I think once we come out of the subsidies and JobKeeper and all that sort of stuff, people will have a difficult time to actually start back up. Cafes weren't making that much money.
Mhm.
So I think we'll have to really look at the public and start to explain to them that, hey, you guys have got to sort of, yeah, maybe pay a little more for coming in and grabbing that, piece of, piece of, luxury from Brazil, Colombia, or whatever. And that's really what it is. And I think we
Yeah,
need to tell the story.
absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I really think that's it's super crucial because ultimately, look, we can stay here and say, well, government should do this, should be regulation, should be, we can point fingers, but I think when there's a lot of problems, it all comes down to each individual on their
Yep.
choices because individuals actually regulate the market by supply demand by default. So,
Yep.
I mean, I think that we give coffee for granted, yet between climate change and a higher demand, it's in danger, like you said. So, what would
Yeah.
you say to people who are going to rewatch this? What can every individual do or look at to do in terms of helping the entire move?
Well, it's interesting. Like we're seeing a big, like there's been an increase obviously in brewing coffee at home, and there's a lot of people who are really enjoying spending a little more. Like we're seeing a lot of our, premium, high-end coffees selling more, which is great to see. People are spending that time at home enjoying it and getting into it, which is exactly what we need. Um, and I think it'd be great to continue with that, in store or whatever. Like you don't want to ram information down people's throats or whatever.
Mm.
People, have this right that they want a great coffee for a reasonable price. And I think we need to do that. But I think it's important to tell the full story and perhaps, um, focus on the product. But yeah,
The
yeah.
story, yeah, 100%. And uh, Burke Anti is sending through a question. To understand the process of choosing the business name, would you tell the historical story of Baba Budan and Seven Seeds? And why did this inspire you so strongly to have those business names?
Well, for me, it was a journey as well. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was my journey through coffee. And I started out really knowing nothing about the product. So I was reading a lot about it and going through. And there was one character, this guy, Ali ibn Umar al-Shadili, who was, he was in Yemen, and he was this guy who was sort of reportedly, it's sort of hearsay a little bit, but he was the one who commoditized coffee. He could see the value in it. And he was, I suppose, the first guy to really understand its enormity and how it could really, shape the world. And then obviously, a monk from India who was going to Mecca, Baba Budan, came through and actually, stole, smuggled the seven seeds back to India, where pretty much most coffee came from those seven seeds that went back to there. A couple of them were taken to the French, observatory, and a lot of stock came out of there. So it was that sort of lineal transition that, we were doing with naming. Unfortunately, as we got a little further down the track, a few other people picked up on it and started to name, the next sort of people in the chain. So at that stage, we had to stop the actual naming succession, unfortunately. But
Which
hey,
I think it's beautiful also the connection between your values and your transparency and storytelling. I think that when my customers ask me about what I do in terms of what's the strategy around digital marketing and social media for coffee shops or cafes, I mean it is all about storytelling. I think that what you just said is a story even behind the name. I think it's fantastic. And thanks for that question, Burke. Now, going back on my questions, Melbourne is, I think, safely considered somewhat the capital of coffee, and also thanks to people like yourself and your vision. But if you could change one thing, what would that be?
it's a good question. Um, if I could change one thing, I'd probably go back in time a little bit and probably get more involved with the the governing organisations and try and, get them to focus a little more on the coffee, maybe more than the barista championships or things like that. That's going to sound harsh, but
No,
that's
no, no, no.
yeah. It's an interesting question. I think we have a great, culture. I don't want to be I think, Melbourne's, it's come a long way in the years that I've been involved in the industry. And it's a huge thing, it's a huge thing for tourism and all those things. And it's really explored, a lot of different aspects of coffee, like the, filter coffees and all that sort of stuff that are, common in cafes across, the whole region now, is just, it's a fairly recent thing. So it's great to see people enjoying, that appreciation of, those sort of brews. To me, I think, it'll be great to see us continue doing really interesting things with roasting and presenting coffees and things like that. I think our public are very supportive of us. I think we're lucky. I think, there's still a lot more time to enjoy the coffee scene in Melbourne.
Yeah, I think so too. The one thing that Scott Rao was saying that he would like to see more in Melbourne is probably a higher volume or higher quality as far as batch brewing goes. I think that would enhance a lot of things, but then he would take things that we do in Melbourne back to the USA. I find interest in the USA, the crossing between USA and Australia, because I met several baristas from America coming here, and basically they come here as the country where they're gonna learn their coffee, yet there's a lot of amazing coffee companies in the USA themselves. So it's pretty cool to see Melbourne to be seen as a destination, but I also think that it's like when you're the winning champion, like Michael Jordan, then you have the expectations, to win each game. So that's why I've asked that question, because I think that maybe in the past year or two, because it's such a cultural thing, we'll give it for granted that maybe we kind of, sit on the bum.
I think there's been a lot of financial pressures on cafes and roasteries in Melbourne, which have caused the coffee to go down in quality. I think people, and it's only natural, like there's been a huge, boom in this industry where there's a lot of, operators and people like that. And so I think we've got to a stage now where we're at, peak cafe, we're past the tipping point. And so I think now it'll be an interesting situation to see who can come out at the other side of this, because this will cause a lot of hurt for a lot of people. I don't expect anyone to come out back to 100%. Like some cafes out in the suburbs are doing fantastic. There's a huge increase just because of where people are positioned and things like that. So I think that they're doing really well, which is great. I think in general, people aren't probably going into cafes as much, obviously, because of the lockdown restrictions. And I think that'll continue for a while. So I think in general, you'll see, a reduction in money being spent in cafes. And I think that will be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And to connect on that, actually, I think that we're going to see the game changing as far as e-commerce go, in the sense of a lot of people now getting used to staying home. So the person who was introverted, let's say with the gym, right now, that person understood that can work out from home. Therefore, change of human consumer behavior, we're going to see something very interesting. I agree. I also think, which is leading to the next question, what I've noticed being on the road, hitting the pavement for 2 years before I quit my job, is a problem that we often see, especially in Melbourne, is that people with no experience opening more and more coffee shops, which created all sorts of issues in the market. And it's not their fault. This is not being harsh, because they go sold the dream. They go to a cafe on a Saturday or Sunday, they see it busy, they think, oh, 1850 for smashed avocados, I can actually pull half off on it, I would do it better. They start counting people, but they are working Monday to Friday in an office or into a massage or wherever. What do you think what could be a solution? I mean, after all, if you think about it, a lawyer needs a degree to practice and work. Do you know what I'm saying? So what would it take to open a cafe. I'm not saying that we should have a degree to open a cafe, but would that potentially be sort of direction to avoid over saturation?
Uh, Look, I think it's the market. I don't think you can really control it too much. And I think a lot of, like, to me, a lot of people who come in don't quite understand the fundamentals of a business plan and really looking at, cost of goods. I see a lot of people trapped in a bit of a cycle where they're just always playing catch up. Um, the reality is, I think, you really have to understand and follow through with just, sound, processes in the kitchen mainly, but also, excuse me, out on the machine. Like realistically, I see a lot of, places doing food and they've got no idea what food costs would be. And they could be losing money in their kitchen, even though they're a busy cafe. Especially now with, fluctuations in, like you were talking avocados earlier, like, the price fluctuation in that is quite huge. So you really need to be very focused in regards to the mathematical side of business, working out, your business plan. And, I think with coffee, that's the same thing. You really need to look at an approach. Like the cost of coffee going into, a beverage isn't that high. Like to use a good coffee isn't that high. The actual bill that comes in weekly from your coffee roaster is the one thing that's quite shocking to see. And it's sort of what people want to minimize. But, you look at some companies that are selling cheap coffee, they want you to put 22 grams in the basket, or, the barista's practice is really messy. And there's a lot of waste and things like that. Like, I think there's a lot of aspects to business which you should tighten up on. And I think you can be very efficient and use really good quality products and have, lower costs than if you actually going for cheap products and don't understand the process. So I'd like to see, some sort of ability for people to study that and come into it. Because I've been into cafes where, it's just such a mess. There's coffee going everywhere. They're wasting, so much, and yet they really want a really cheap product. And I'm like, hey, you don't need to be cramming that stuff in, 18.5 grams or 19 grams is going to be perfect for, what you're working with, and all those things they haven't never thought of. It's just, it's the harder side of business. You know what I mean? Like it's great to have the Lamazocco sitting on the bench. It's great to have the fit out and all that sort of stuff. But underneath it all, there's really a fundamental approach to being effective and efficient. And I think we need to do that, and not waste. We don't want to waste food. You don't want to waste anything. But, now and in the future, I think we really need to conserve and be respectful of all those things.
Yeah, and of course, if you have never put a food inside a kitchen or behind a bar, it becomes difficult to control that because, I remember a chef screaming for the way that I was cutting a pumpkin because,
Yeah.
I had left too much flesh on the peel and there was a special technique, and then,
Yeah,
you learn the way. I think if you haven't learned the ropes, then it's going to become difficult. That's why I
Yeah.
also think that a lot of people want to go too big too soon, like big kitchen, big venue, big bar, but maybe you can
Yeah.
start from a smaller size.
Yeah. Look, I think there's nothing wrong from, just understanding what you want to achieve, what your model is. If you're just doing toasted sandwiches, I love a good toasted sandwich. Everyone pretty much does. So I think if you really look at what you want to do and what you enjoy yourself and put that into your business, I think that's an important aspect of it. So, um, yeah, I think it's dangerous to sort of think, oh yeah, this is what everyone wants, and we're going to do this massive kitchen and all that. Like it works obviously for some people, but I think you have to have a level of experience that matches that. If you base it on yourself and your likes and your approach, I think that's probably a better model. So you understand your motivations behind it and can really feel what you're doing and be, I think it's really important to be honest when you approach what you're doing and be able to stand back and look and see what the problems are. You can't give yourself a pat on the back the whole time. You know, if it's not true. Yeah.
100%. Because we crossed the halfway mark, usually ask a out of the box question. Uh, who would you like if you had the opportunity to have dinner with?
Oh, like anyone, like, you know, like,
Anyone, even from a previous century, you know.
wow, that's, yeah, well, I think I'd like to have someone sort of current day. There's some crazy people out there, isn't there? I'd like someone who's a little bit crazy. Um, like, I think at the moment it would be great. Like, I would love to probably, you know, talk to some sports people, but I think business, you know, in this frame, like, you know, people like, I don't really want to say Elon Musk, but, you know, like, he's a crazy at the moment. He seems to have gone off the rails. So I think he'd be good to, I think he'd party a little bit as well, I reckon, for sure. So it'd be probably good to have dinner with him. So yeah, I don't know,
I'll
but
take
like
it.
it'd be, yeah, yeah,
It's a question I like to ask because it then after this is gonna finish, you might someone might pop in your head. You're like, actually, you know, I also like to have dinner with this person and that person.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, I'll second Elon Musk for sure. He's a interesting character. And a funny
yeah,
story, I was reading, not sure if you saw, but when he introduced the armor truck, the one of the
yeah, yeah,
latest products, they failed with the throwing of the brick and the glass shattered.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and there's a few people that have studied and analyzed some of the facial and all of that, and they're thinking that it was actually made on purpose.
oh,
Because
really?
then, because of the failure, the exposure that got macro went viral. And now, in fact, all the pre-orders are sold out.
Right.
So when
Yeah,
most people are thinking, oh, haha, here you go, you failed, some people think it actually that was done on purpose, which I don't know. I mean, that's a theory, which I like to
yeah,
think so. But yeah,
interesting.
no, yeah. Um, okay, so we really covered a lot here, and I think I want to tie it up with what's your coffee mission? What's your mission? Because obviously you go LA going on, you go Melbourne going on, and a lot of different things probably on your plate.
Yeah, it's an interesting, like I do, like my mission at the moment is perhaps to, I think, navigate the next couple of years in regards to, I think, trying to lead by example with coffees that we purchase and just our attitude. We don't really want to do a song and dance about it. We just want to do our thing and fit it into the environment, you know, the current coffee environment to show that you can do that. Um, and like, yeah, I think, you know, really focusing on that, like we're working with people in Colombia in regards to looking at a very focused look at what it costs to produce coffee in that particular region, whether it's, you know, Pitalito or Nariño or wherever in Colombia. Like there's different costs for different areas based on transport and things like that. So I think really looking at that model, and also looking at our approach to the producers that we've been working with for a long, long time and seeing what, you know, is best for them. Um, so that's one of our missions. I actually have an interest in a farm in Honduras with a friend, Erwin Merish from the Merish family, who have got farms in Nicaragua and Honduras. And it'll be good to actually focus down and see, you know, a little bit more about that. Yeah, because it's very difficult to make money on the farm. So it'll be, yeah, nice to try and, I think, get that back into the black. And yeah, I think that'll keep me busy for the next couple of years. I'm sure there's a lot of people, you know, a lot of young people who are going to carry the baton, hopefully,
Oh,
forward.
mate, you are one of those evergreen. You know, I think that there is so much innovation. I mean, you would probably be on the list of people I would love to have dinner with, to be honest, or at least have a coffee, because you know, anyway. There's a lot there. So I think that you will carry it for a long time, and I was actually talking to Tim Wendelbo maybe 10 days ago, and he really brought up an interesting aspect on how a lot of his customers or a lot of his workers are like a little like, oh, we're getting bored to get the same origins each year. But he was making such a strong argument on the importance of having long-term relationships with the same farmers in terms of
Yeah.
collaboration, in terms of almost become part of the family. So basically your mission is surrounding keeping those relationships at farm, at origin.
It's good. It's good to see, like a lot of our producers, have come a long way. They've got a lot more clients. They've helped a lot of their neighbors out. They might be, buying their coffee or offering their coffee. And I think that's really, really great to see. Like we buy off a couple of producers in Guatemala. I saw KC come on before, and she spearheaded a lot of that when she was sourcing with us. She was up with Freddie and Alaria a lot of the time, speaking to them, and we've just got their coffees in and cupping through, the samples from them, and they're doing, exciting, micro lots with different fermentations and things like that. So you can see that they've really hit their stride and doing some really interesting thing with coffee, planting a little bit more diversity with varietals in the ground. So, in the space of, 10 years, when they, had one or two varietals in the ground, they've changed to having, maybe 15, 20 different varietals and doing these experimental things and supplying, a whole lot of different markets, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and all those places where their coffees are well received. And it's great to see, it's great to see this diversity coming in. Like coffee, there's some really great things about coffee at the moment. It's becoming really diverse. There's these taste profiles that are coming out, which is so interesting, just by, the different approaches. Like, coffee was a very sort of dark age sort of process. There was, uncontrolled fermentation, but now producers are really honing in on their skills. And it'll be great to see in the next, few years what could happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a very interesting conversation with Joseph from 90 Plus as far as processing and the importance also to develop and create an experience at farm eventually more openly, because people then can get an idea much better of the experience. And sticking with the experience, I think that it's safe to say that I'm a big believer that the overall experience inside a coffee shop should be matched with the quality of the cup. I think that it's another aspect that perhaps those basics that you were talking about in hospo, we kind of started shifting away as far as, greetings, attention to customers, attention to detail. I think that's going to be very important too, for sure.
I agree.
Now, you covered the whole spectrum of coffee, or a wide range of it. Could you pinpoint a couple of memorable moments throughout this crazy journey of yours?
Well, I think, actually opening the first coffee store was pretty epic. It took a lot of work. My son had just been born, and, we had no money, and we opened the doors, and it took a while to get going, but it was a great feeling to have, this business slowly building. So that was one, great moment. I think starting roasting, like there was a lot of negative people about me roasting, saying that, people took it as almost a personal affront that I was considering roasting. So, how dare I do that? What, you don't, So to actually get to a point and be roasting and actually enjoying it and feeling that my product was great, not great, but, it was good enough for us to use, and it was really something that we felt we had a pride in, we were always looking to improve and looking at other people's coffee. But yeah, it was great to actually start roasting and explore that. All of a sudden, it opened up a world of going to Origin and learning a whole lot more, and it was really exciting. And I think, now, looking at, where we're at and looking back and seeing that there is, this, great world that we've got, Melbourne's got a fantastic, coffee population and, extremely kind public that support us and do all that sort of stuff. It's great to see.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And look, there's a few things. I mean, for instance, now that I'm talking to you as well, I had the luck to work a little bit with Toby Smith,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
great character. And
Great
when I was
character.
yeah, when I was working with him, another person good to have dinner with. I'm sure you
That's
had dinner
great.
with him.
I've had
Uh,
dinner. Yeah.
and I was working with him, I think you can really vibe, you can really absorb that, you started a journey, but that journey, it's almost like you just started, even though it was a few years back. Because of that passion that you have, you can really feel it. But what would you give, what advice would you give to yourself when you first started coffee? I think that's a great
Um,
question.
it is. Yeah, it is. I think it's just to enjoy it and to try. Like, I think it's really enjoyable to go through a process of learning. Like, I really did find that aspect of, it kept me really fresh and, and honest and very keen. If I could say something to me, just, enjoy the ride, dude. It's going to be great, because, there's ups and downs, but I think, I'm very lucky to have had the opportunity to do this. I sort of fell into it, and it really, and luckily enough, I just stumbled my way through and got to a point where I was just, learning so much and felt very, humbled to be allowed to, to get to where I am now.
I think that the second last word that you use is such a key element. What I believe myself, I think that being humble is such an undervalued and underestimated element in a lot of things that we do.
Yeah,
There's there is this whole hustle culture out there. I think that it's okay, but we see a lot of people who burn out, who don't enjoy the process, and they might not be, driven or thriving by a passion of theirs or doing actually something that they like. It's because it's
yeah,
considered the right thing to do. But I think being humble, patient, and full of gratitude for the little gains, I think that goes a long way. But do you have any special word of wisdom for the people out there who are chasing the passion for coffee, but they are perhaps stuck in what's considered a good job or a job that family told you that you should be doing?
Well, I think, like, I think it'll change a little. I think there'll be other, aspects to coffee. And I do think we are, like, I do think coffee will go through a little bit of a hard time. So I think people should just probably chill, look at the opportunities that are going to come out. Like, really focus on what they want to achieve. Do they like coffee, first of all? Why do they want to get into it? Is it about, like, because food is such a big component of a lot of cafes in Melbourne. If you just want to do coffee, what are you going to do? It can become very time consuming if you want to roast for yourself and actually, man that cafe. I think, understanding the dynamic with, dealing with staff and things like that, I think you have to be a little bit of a people person and try and look at getting a great team together and looking after them. So to me, I think they need to ask a few questions of themselves, and if they still really want to, go ahead, do it. Get in there and look at it from your perspective. Don't say, "Oh, I like what those guys do," or "These guys, I want to replicate that." I think you really need to have your own spin on it. And like, you can see, like, I've seen a few people who have, come into the industry. They don't particularly like, light roasted coffee, and they've gone a lot darker, and they've actually done their own thing with that. And it's been really successful, or vice versa, or something else. You know what I mean? So there's usually certain people, out there who are very similar to you and who will appreciate what you're doing. And I think if you base things on, a little bit about yourself and what you enjoy, I think that
Yeah,
would work.
I think that's yeah. I'm letting that sink because I think that's super important, and especially when you look at staff and and food. It's not easy. It's not easy gig,
No,
but once you know, sorry.
there's a lot of there's a lot of easier gigs at the moment. I think you'll find, especially with uncertain times in regards to even legislation about how many people will be in the cafe, and all that sort of stuff. Like the model that we're used to may not particularly work.
Yeah.
So yeah.
100%. And Aussie in Prague, thanks for the question, asking, how do you continue to cultivate so many great coffee people? So many seem to move on and do great things with your blessing dash support as well.
Yeah, that's a good question. Like I think for us, we encourage people to continue learning, like I did, and we try and give people the opportunity to experience either maybe running a little cafe by themselves, one of our cafes, or managing, or like hopefully people will move through. Like one of our roasters at the moment started as a dishwasher, so for us, we're very happy when people go on and do their own thing. It's important for them to continue on and put their own spin on it. We definitely don't see it as competition. Sometimes it is, but like we don't feel that. I think it sort of builds the whole strength of what we do if people take that away and incorporate that into their business model. And I think for them, I think hopefully they have the understanding that, they can go and do anything they like. They have a solid business skill behind them. Because you can't, you've got to be nice to people, but you've got to show them exactly how business is. And sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes you're not making money. So yeah, I think it's really important to give them an honest look at business when they're in it. Encourage them to learn and to go on and do their own thing. Yeah, it's good. It's good, if they can. Like you look at, there's quite a lot of people, but like if you look at Taylor, who's, in, Norway with the donuts and coffee and things like that, or, even, Bowen, there's a whole lot of people who have really gone on and put their spin on it and done some great things, and like, it's not solely us. Like, I think like a lot of people have worked elsewhere as well, and done things and moved on. But I think it's great to see, a hospitality community that really goes through and has some really good skills at the end of it and goes off and is successful and people enjoy their place, It's great. It's really comforting to see those people doing well.
And I also think, thank you for that. Like Ozzy in Prague says, so rare in the world of coffee, the attitude of non-competitors and clapping hands. I also think that if you're good to them, they should be good to you in a way, in the sense of they will mention you, they will mention the credit, versus if you were not good to them in the first place, then you might create a little friction, then maybe they're going to start coming against you rather than working with you, because ultimately we are part of the same, under the same umbrella, under the same sky, however you want to say it, in terms of, like you said, it's hospitality. Put your own spin on it. Sure, it might be competition, but you're not opening the shop right next to mine. It's like,
Yeah, look, I think it's just what it is. Like someone else is going to do it or whatever. Like to a certain extent, I think a lot of when you've been in business for a while, I don't like initially when you first come in and you're probably not as understanding. You might feel that competition if someone opens next to you or whatever. But the reality is it usually actually brings more business to both companies. And if you actually can, firmly look at, doing great things to collectively and building up that collective appreciation, like it does start to get, a movement. And in Melbourne, we have that in regards to, people coming and checking us out, people wanting to come here and check out the coffee scene. And it's huge. You look at, the overseas market coming in and enjoying it. And like, with Seven Seeds being close to Melbourne University, we have a lot of students from, Indonesia, Taiwan, China, Korea, who at the end of it say, we're going to miss, this, we want to take this culture back, and there is places back in those countries based on our culture here, which is fantastic, you know.
Love it, love it. And an old friend of mine told me that if you're worried about competition, also means that you're not confident in what you're doing or insecure.
Yep,
So that's the other element. But
yep.
look, Instagram is actually quite harsh when it comes to cut it off because it gives you a 30-second notice, and I think we got a shy 4 minutes away. So I want to just get this out of the way first. Thank you so much, Mark, to popping on with us. It's been very humbling and full of gratitude for all the things that you shared. I'm really glad that we got to do this, and hopefully
Yeah,
I'll be
yeah,
able
it's like,
to share a cup of coffee with you soon, live in person. But yeah, thank you really for coming on. And Nolan, I know Nolan quite well. I worked with his father. He shared what a breath of fresh air this talk has been. It's amazing to see some humility and respect in your vision. One of the most rewarding talks I've seen. Thanks, Nolan. I appreciate it. And thanks to you, Mark. And,
yeah,
uh,
thank,
for the
thank
final
you.
few minutes, the people who are going to rewatch these, okay, Seven Seeds, where else they can find you? What else you've been doing, so that we can get a little bit of
Um,
an idea of
so
what you're doing.
we,
Yeah,
we, we used to have a few cafes in Melbourne, Seven Seeds, Brother Baba Boudin, and Traveller. In Sydney, I have Paramount Coffee Project and a little hotel project there called Paramount House Hotel. In in LA, I've got two stores. Paramount Coffee Project is the name over there as well. In Honduras, a little farm down in Ciguatepeque called Finca Santa Lucia, and yeah, and that's probably about it, really.
fantastic. Again, yeah, thank you. I'll definitely, once I turn this off, I'll have to sit down and digest a few things that you shared and let them let them process begin for myself. And I'm assuming for many people who are gonna tune in and rewatch it. Team Styles, we this is gonna be rewatchable, so it's all good. Yeah, again, Mark, thank you. I don't want to hold you too long. I'm sure you got probably plenty of things to do, and I will hopefully talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks again.
Thank you, Mark. Cheers.
See you.
Uh, there you have it. Um, yeah, I'm super, super happy. Mark has definitely been a person that I've, I have tracked down thanks to LinkedIn, and I try to bring on, and very, very humble to have had the opportunity to talk to him. Usually I say that I'm happy if these live streams bring value to one person. In this case, it has brought a lot of value to myself. Um, Firstly, so I'm feeling very, very grateful. So yeah, very grateful for it. And Nolan, good to see you, brother. I hope you're well. Hope you're safe, man. It's been a while since the last time I saw you. Yeah, we should catch up soon, brother. Your dad was here on the show when I was interviewing Joseph from 90 Plus. Uh, you can actually see him on YouTube. I posted it yesterday. It's pretty funny. Yeah, be safe out there too, Bianca and Ozzy in Prague. Thanks for the amazing question. Um, but yeah, yeah, this is what I'm all about as well. If people who know me, been humble and yeah, like I said, I generally will tune this off, repost this on IGTV for people who missed it. I'm gonna sit on the couch and let it all sink, because you don't talk to people like this every day who started a movement and are able to still be so humble, visionary, driven, and yet super, I don't know, in the zen, in the element, if that makes sense. I think that sometimes success can put people in a bubble and put themselves on a higher moral ground, but with Mark, it's zero of that. So anyway, the timer has started from Instagram. It's 20 seconds left. If you like this, please take a screenshot, reshare it, retweet it, tell people and family. Instagram is giving me a little bit hard time to promote this, so it's all about you guys. Thank you for tuning in. Hope to see you again soon, and a new week starting on Monday. And take care.